Hi and welcome, Action supporters. Thanks for joining us here today. We wanted to bring you one last update before the election happens in just a few days about some of the trends we're seeing, last-minute thoughts before voting starts November 7th. Thank you so much for your support in helping us get to this point. Through your endeavors, we've been able to knock tens of thousands of doors, make tens of thousands of calls, send hundreds of thousands of texts. So thank you again, and thanks for joining us. Well, thanks for joining us today, Jessi, to take time out of our busy schedules to discuss the election. 5 days left. So how are you feeling? What are we seeing?
Yeah, so I think there's some really interesting trends to look at. And part of this, I know you mentioned in the update that's going out to donors, is the enthusiasm gap that we've been seeing in absentee and early voting.
That is the thing everyone's talking about. Leftist pundits trying to ignore, right pundits just being confused by it, frankly, because honestly, I'm not being dramatic when I say we've never seen this before. And with the Governor's Secure Our Vote initiative and with our own efforts to push early and absentee ballot, how much of it is we're cannibalizing 4 out of 4 election day voters who are going to show up anyway, and how much of it do you think is us actually capturing the 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4 election?
Well, that's really the big question on everybody's mind, because this strategy is so new. And so Secure Our Vote, the governor's PAC, has done a lot of work to go out and find these early and absentee, low propensity conservative voters. And we've done a lot of that work as well, along with lots of other right of center groups. So the big question is going to be how many of those folks are truly low propensity voters, and how much are we taking away from the turnout on election day. Now, right now, the weather looks good on election day, so there shouldn't be any reason for people to stay home, which sometimes happens, and this is really going to come down to a turnout game. So because this is such a new strategy, I don't think anybody really knows what to make of it, but it seems to be leading, at least in comparison, percentage returns of Democrats versus Republicans that have cast those ballots. It seems to be that there's a lot less enthusiasm on the Democrat side than there was in 2021 or 2022. And certainly this is a state year, but you would expect at least the percents to be keeping up.
Absolutely. And in 2021, we saw an absolute presidential level surges in turnout in especially rural areas, Republican strongholds, which delivered a victory to Youngkin and the ticket. We're hoping for that on election day. So for decades, the theory goes that low turnout benefits Republicans. That just isn't true anymore. And so you're going to see a lot of pundits struggle to adapt to this new normal, since 2016, where Republicans actually benefit from higher turnout in many cases.
And the interesting thing is, I know we like to look at polls in the office to see where we're at, but at this point in time, there really isn't a lot that are super reflective of what those numbers mean. But we have seen quite a bit of an ad war. I know you've been looking at the campaign finance reports. Anything that you want to point out from the last filings?
So Democrats caught up. They're ahead now. So I would say last report I was just reading, I think Democrats in total in the month of October raised $13 million. Republicans raised about 10.8 mil. So you're seeing about Democrats are now going to be spending 15-20% more on average in most of these swing districts. There's a few where Republicans have parity or they're even slightly outspending the Democrats. But in most of these districts now, what we're seeing is the Democrats have caught up. They've eclipsed Republicans. Now, why that isn't necessarily bad news is, one, I think we've reached the point of oversaturation where I don't think people dropping more and more money on these ad buys is actually making that much of a difference.
Especially this late in the cycle.
Yeah, everyone has reached maximum velocity of the ads they can handle and take in. I'm sure you guys are already sick of them. And so I'm not sure how much that extra that helps, but also Republicans in 2019, which is the race we frankly should be comparing to, because
last year we elected Senate seats for everybody's awareness.
Yeah, off year election. It was a blue wave year. Democrats outspent Republicans by about 5-1 on average, maybe 6-1, 7-1 in some places. And so Youngkin and Republicans have managed to kind of catch up and actually achieve some semblance of spending parity, which is very important. The other thing, circling back to the turnout game mentioned, it's very important to know that statewide turnout does not matter.
Exactly.
So a lot of these polls, the handful of scant polling we've seen, mostly statewide, which it's like Washington Post says D+2 amongst likely voter. Now, the interesting thing is it could be a D+2 year, it could be a D+5 year, and Republicans could theoretically win because the only turnout that matters is in these swing districts in the opposite direction. We could see a massive surge in rural turnout and in like Southwest Virginia, and that wouldn't matter because statewide turnout doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to matter is turnout in these very specific swing districts. I think we're going to see a surge in these swing districts turnout where you're going to see like high levels of turnout in a lot of these precincts in these swing districts, and then you're going to see really low turnout in districts that are in uncompetitive races.
Well, and you can see that in the spending too. Both parties have been very, very focused on where they're spending money. It's been in the same couple races that they're contesting on both sides. And there really hasn't been a ton of spending from outside groups or from the campaigns themselves within districts that are pretty reliably red or pretty reliably blue. So I do think, Bruce is absolutely right here. What you're going to see is heavy turnout in those swing areas. And just as a reminder to our voters, we've been tracking these districts since the spring, since we knew who the primary candidates were, and we were able to come out of that with our efforts. And so we've really been heavily focused in these key competitive districts as well. And in a lot of these cases in 2019, in 2017 even, we saw many of these close seats won by less than 100 votes. So do you think we're going to see that again this year?
Absolutely. I could see as many as 5 different races that come down to 100 to 500 vote range. I mean, I'd say 500 vote range for like state senate, and then like 100 vote range for House of Delegates. There's in that House of Delegates alone, there's 4 seats that could occur in. I think we're going to see several recounts, and there's a very good chance we don't know who won the state senate or House of Delegates for a week after the election. I mean, at this point, everyone's flying a little blind, and we're seeing the Democrats panic on one side, screaming stolen election about Republican campaign tactics.
That's always a good sign.
Yeah, I don't think many people who are confident in their chances start yelling stolen election a week before the election even happens. So, the other thing that's been interesting is them really going after people like Juan Pablo for their vote-getting tactics and AB/EV push. It's weird hearing the Democrats complain about ballot harvesting.
Well, and it's interesting for those of our viewers who might be interested in election integrity. The governor recently worked with the Department of Elections to purge a little over 3,000 voters from the rolls. Now, these are people who haven't voted in many, many years, or they've moved, or they've passed away. And so this is pretty standard procedure before elections.
Every state is supposed to do it.
Exactly.
It's a basic election security precaution.
And you've seen the Democrats go all the way to the national level complaining about this as election interference. So I think at least that should tell us how nobody feels confident. But, it may also indicate that they feel like they're down in some of these spots.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just telling you right before we started rolling, Obama is shooting 2 robocalls for 100,000 homes in some of these target races through Eric Holder's group. I mean, they're dusting him off the bench to bring him in as their only popular Democrat superstar to try to gin up some voters. And the fact that they waited till November 1st to finally ask him to do something tells me that they're not feeling too great about their chances.
Well, and as of today, we only have a couple days left of early voting. For those of our listeners who are interested, it goes through Saturday, November 4th. And then it's just election day. So this is really a kind of a game time play for them. And there's not really a ton that this type of robocall effort is going to be able to influence at this point.
No.
So it seems like a last ditch effort to get as much as they can.
Like you mentioned earlier, at this point, it's kind of like we're locked in. We're on the death spiral trajectory of like what's going to happen is going to happen at this point. And,
it's all baked in now. It's all in the Lord's hands.
Yeah, exactly. So before we wrap up, is there any like last minute observations, trends, things about what we're doing that you think is worth mentioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that we've been working on all year is having people talk to their friends and neighbors to encourage them to get out to vote based on their conservative principles and to support candidates, especially in these really competitive districts that Bruce and I have been highlighting all year. This is so critical, and legitimately, many of these races could be less than 500, less than 100 votes. So for those of you who have supported us for a really long time, for those of you who are tuning in and watching this, Bruce and I, and I'm sure many other conservatives would just ask that in the coming days, you think about anybody that you know who might live in these districts and reach out to them. There's been ad wars raging on both sides for months now, but really the only thing that makes an impact and could really influence somebody's decision is going to be that personal connection. So we just encourage you to keep speaking up on your principles, to keep talking about these conservative issues, to keep talking about how important this election is, because it's not over till it's over, and we need to get as many Christian conservative voters out as possible to determine the next few years of Virginia's history.
Absolutely, and very glad you brought that up. That is something that actually would matter, that cut through the noise in the ads and everything that's just kind of white noise at this point. But keep us in your prayers. Keep supporting us as we head into these last few days, and pray for our Commonwealth.